This period of time, about 8, 9, 10 years ago, maybe even less than that, in a meeting of the Shana Bet Rabbeim, we had discussed that how to bring the Shana Bet together. So I'm very proud that I had suggested that we have a Sichas Moser during this period of time, and it's one of the highlights for us of the week. And a few years ago, I think it was Rav Aron's idea. Rav Aron suggested that we think of particular themes that we focus on, and what Rav Aron Shlita suggested was to focus on Shalom Bayis. So when I had this idea in mind, I thought that it would start 11:30 promptly, and that it wouldn't compromise the second of Shir, and it would end latest at 12. And Shir generally starts for us at 12 o'clock. It's going to go a little bit past 12 o'clock, this talk, and that's a Maimer Chazal. Chazal say that Laman Shalom, we're Mochek Es Hashem. We even, the Gemara in Sota tells us that we erase the shame of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And Rabbosai, this is no less than that. What we are discussing right now is at the core of the Shalom Bayis of Klal Yisrael. You'll hear from other Rabbeim as well. And it's Kodshei Kadoshim. This time is Kodshei Kadoshim, and for that, you're Mochek Es Hashem. Unfortunately, someone asked me to arbitrate in a terrible machlokes, and I was leaning over the Taz in the afternoon that I was learning with the Kolel fellows, and I entirely misunderstood the Taz from the beginning to the end, because my mind was trying to make Shalom, and I felt I was Mekayim. One of the Talmidim, one of the Avrechim came over to me, and I said the Taz backwards, the whole thing backwards. I said, Baruch Hashem, Kiyamti the mitzvah Mechikas Hashem for Leman Hashalom. So that's what we're going to do today. Today we're going to take a little bit of time from learning, which is the second most Kodshei Kadoshim, to talk about the importance of Shalom Bayis. So I'm going to do with you today, I think I'm the first one, is I'm going to discuss with you 7, take out your pens and papers, it might be helpful to jot down things, 7 things that are critical in terms of points to ponder about Shalom Bayis. The first 2 are really what's going to frame a lot of what I'm going to say. The first 2, if you will, are the Avi Avos, and then there's going to be another 5 that are going to flow. Zok the Heilige Zoyar. The Zoyar in Bereshis says the following: HaKadosh Baruch Hu vayivra Adam, He created man. The Zoyar HaKadosh says that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu created man, He created 2 neshamas which are one. And that is that He created man and woman, which are really 2 parts, as Rebbetzin Abramov says. She's a very important mashpia in the world of Shalom Bayis and Hilchos Nida. HaKadosh Baruch Hu created 2 parts of one whole. And my wife and I were separated. We were separated when HaKadosh Baruch Hu created us, and our tafkid is to reconnect. And that is the essence of what Shalom Bayis is from the perspective of basic Yisodos of Kabbalah, is this idea that husband and wife are reconnecting to something that had separated them from the beginning. So how do we go about this phenomenon? Rav Ron Shlita said at Balamor many years ago, 11:30 Sunday afternoon was the first time I had ever heard this Balamor, and it deeply affected my life. Rav Ron quoted the Balamor's Hakdama to Shas, that the Balamor describes that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created us with kavod. Kavod is the dignity of an individual. Here in Yeshiva, we often speak about bad kavod and redifas hakavod, and that's something that's very true, and all those things need to be addressed as well. But at its core, writes the Balamor, what that has to do with Hakdama of Shas Ayin Sham. Take a look at the Balamor; it's a beautiful Balamor. The Balamor says HaKadosh Baruch Hu created us with a deep dignity, with a deep kavod. And I would argue that one of the most important parts, and probably the Av of Shalom Bayis, the most important component of Shalom Bayis, is what I would describe as Hakaras Kvoda, recognizing the kavod, the dignity of one's wife. And therefore, the most important part and the tenet of everything that we're going to discuss afterwards is hakaras kvoda, deeply understanding and internalizing the deep human respect that one has to have for one's wife. Now, what do I mean? What I mean, first of all, is HaKadosh Baruch Hu has entrusted you through the bris nesuin, to pardon the term that I'm using, to love and to cherish, and that is, at its core, it's not just these empty English words to love and cherish, but it's what the Baal HaMaor describes, the deep kavod, the human dignity that your wife has, that you have a responsibility to bring together with your neshama. That is your avoda in the philosophical realm. Practically, what that means is the following. The most important part of Shalom Bayis is not compatibility. There's a couple that I know quite well who are not compatible for each other. And they've had a beautiful marriage for over 40 years. And the reason for that is because the husband's a tzaddik and the wife is a tzaddikess. And if for whatever reason you've internalized some point along the way that there are things that you and your wife are incompatible about, everybody is going to counter that. Some more and some less. But at the end of the day, if there's a recognition that there is a special person that HaKadosh Baruch Hu set you up with, then you have a responsibility to do everything you can to have that deep respect for her kavod. Very practically, going from that halacha l'maisa general rule to very, very practical terms. When a husband in the morning, if his wife does the laundry, if he does the laundry, that's even better. But if his wife does the laundry, when he opens his drawer and he takes out the socks from his drawer, has he thought about how the socks got there, those clean socks got there? I want to zero in on this point, Rabbi Osai. Your wife, Emir Tzeh Hashem, is going to have dreams and ambitions. If you have a healthy marriage, all of those dreams and ambitions will be secondary to building a special home together. And that means that if you don't have a maid in the house, that when she cleans the house, you have two ways that you could relate to her, or that she could feel. One is, she could feel like that she's a cleaning lady. Or the other is that she could feel that she's building a special home with you. And the litmus test, the line between the two, is hakaras kvoda. And I'll be even sharper. She could view herself as someone who washes the toilets, or someone who is building a mishkan ma'at. She could view herself, chas v'chalil, if her husband treats her as a prostitute, or she could view herself as someone who she's building a special home with children together with her husband. And that all depends on hakaras kvoda. Rav Nebenzahl Shlita said in this room to the Avrechim, he quoted the pasuk, Kol amar Hashem zacharti lo chesed ne'urayich avas kulasayich. HaKadosh Baruch Hu remembers the time that when we were young. He gave Musar to the Kollel guys. He said, so many of you here are big Talmidei Chachamim. And now you have very important positions in the world of Torah, etc. He said, remember that when you got married, where you were. Like Rav Nebenzahl said, I remember you were in my shiur. I remember where you were once upon a time. And it's because your wife gave everything for you. And it doesn't matter what she is in her profession. And we had a Talmud whose mother is one of the most prominent doctors in America. And he said to me, Rebbe, when my mother comes home, all she wants to be is a simple mother and wife. Deep down, every woman has that. And it's our responsibility to realize that there was such Mesiras Nefesh that put those socks into the drawer. So that's number one, hakaras kvoda. Number two, tenet number two. This one you've all heard of from Jim Gray, and that is men are from Mars and women are from Venus. Rav Ginsburg Shlita points out that the byline in the book explains why Gray's been divorced more than once. even though the book is extremely, extremely profound, and even though others have suggested other books written by Jewish Orthodox authors, I haven't found a book Shemidaber Le'inyan that gets to the point as well as Gray's book. Unfortunately, though, Gray's byline is how to get the most out of your marriage. That was his problem. Even though his observations are so beautiful, but the byline of the book is how can you get the most out of your marriage? Even if you're aware of all these things, of men are from Mars, women are from Venus, but at the end of the day, it's not about navigating how I can get what I want out of the marriage, but a fluch. The opposite is true. How can my wife and I, through these challenges of men are from Mars, women are from Venus, build a very special, special home? And that means the challenges of men are from Mars, women are from Venus, is at the end of the day we have to think of a way in which we empathize with the processing, particularly as we're going to see emotional processing that takes place on Venus. I have a case once when my Talmidim in the Grus Kolel described to me that he came home, his wife had a challenge that day, the babysitter came late, and because the babysitter came late, so she got late to work, and she was describing to her that her day was terrible and it was awful. He was looking forward to a nice, quiet evening together, and she was just a mess. So she's talking to him, and he realized that the whole problem started because the babysitter came late. So he gets up, and he starts, as she's describing to him, he gets up to get his phone, to start dialing the babysitter, maybe give her a bonus if she comes 10 minutes early. He's trying to think of a way to solve the problem. He starts dialing the number, and he looks up and his wife's crying. What happened? His wife wasn't interested at that time for him to solve the problem. On Mars, what we do is when there's a problem, we put on our fix-it hat and we fix it. In Venus, for some reason, I can't understand it, they're not interested in fixing it. They want to talk about it. And this is one of the things that Gray outlines very, very beautifully. And that's something that we have to understand. And the reason why I say that these things are connected to each other, because hakaras kvoda means that if that's important for my neshama, if that's what my neshama's nourishment needs, if she needs to hear those things and to say those things and for me to listen to her, it's not my responsibility necessary to fix it. A lot of times it's about being that emotional address. So Rabbosai, I can't describe it entirely in all its detail to 19 and 20-year-olds. You're going to have to revisit it as you get older. But at the end of the day, keep this in mind, that there are many times that your wife is going to want to have an emotional address and not necessarily fix the problem. This comes out in one of the most confusing phenomenons that I encounter, and that is that, and I think many other men encounter, that many women, most women, really, really appreciate small gifts. By the way, the irony is, when you want to buy a man a gift, so, for a guy who likes building, so you buy him a drill. A guy who likes learning, you buy him a safe. That's great. When someone buys me a gift, something that's something I needed. For women, anything that's useful, they're not interested in it at all. Not at all. In fact, the better the gift is, that the less useful it is, the better the gift. And the proof is, what do they want when they get engaged? They want a rock. Doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense. But the point is, leaving aside the diamond ring, which is a separate phenomenon that doesn't make any sense by itself, the point is that often what a woman wants is not necessarily something that's purposeful, but something that recognizes how special she is. So if you were asking me what type of gift to get for me, so if every time you're going to buy me a $10 sefer, I would say, I'm waiting for a new Shulchan Aruch. Store up the money, and don't get me a $10 gift every time. When you amass the money, get the Shulchan Aruch. For her, it's the exact opposite. She'd prefer much more a small gift that recognizes, again, it can't have any purpose, that a gift that it's clear that you're showing that you really, really care. I went through this, and I made a big mistake. I was really happy for my wife that she, at a young age, she became an adjunct professor in Stern College. In many ways, in terms of having appreciation for one's spouse. For me, I came to Eretz Yisrael, and with a job. My wife was Moser Nefesh a lot to come to Eretz Yisrael. She had a dream job, especially for a woman in Stern College. We were living in Washington Heights. It was absolutely fantastic, and I was really happy for her. A young woman, she already became a professor. So I went out and I got her a professor thing. I got her this beautiful black briefcase, and I brought it home, and I gave it to her, and she said, "What's this?" So I said, "It's, you're teaching in college now. I thought that you should have this briefcase." She says to me, "Chaim, what's wrong with my pocketbook?" I said, "Nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with your pocketbook." I said, "Well, don't you have a book?" She says, "Yeah, I hold the book in my hand. What do I need this for?" What happened was that I was seeing it from from my perspective. I was seeing it from the Mars perspective. From Mars' perspective, a nice briefcase would be very nice. I wasn't seeing it from her perspective. In fact, what happened? Eventually, the briefcase sat in the closet for about 5 years, and I eventually took it for myself. But that's the challenge of being able to think from a different perspective and to be able to recognize. Number 3, communication. Cloud number 3 is communication. We mentioned that Hakaras Kvoda is even more important than communication, but communication is probably the most important practical thing that relates after the rule of women are from Venus. Zok de'eligus Svasemes. Svasemes says that the word nishba means lekayim. Words create realities. And that means the words that we say to each other become a real existence, as the Svasemes describes. We create emotional environments. We create a new metzius. Rabbeinu Bechai says that's the meaning of the word Baruch. Baruch Atah Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu needs our bracha. The answer is, Baruch is that we're bringing down bracha to the world when we say Baruch Atah Hashem. We're creating a reality of bracha. We're realizing how much bracha is around us. And oy vavoy the opposite. The Gemara in Gittin on Dav Zayin Amanal says, Amar of Yehuda Amarav, Kol Amatil Ema Yisera B'Soich Beisoy, Bali De Gimel Averos Chamuros. If a person creates a negative environment, then not only is that a living Gehenim emotionally, but ultimately that undermines any ruchnius that exists in the house. And therefore now, my dear Bachrim, my dear Talmidim, start now learning how to speak in a positive way. And if there's a negative word to say, slowly work on holding yourself back. Because this is a lifelong avoda, and this could make or break a marriage. Kol amatil emo yisera b'soich beisoy. There's something deeper. Not only dibur in terms of a person having a ayin tov that Rav Natan described before, but also in terms of how you listen. Communication is not only about speaking, but actually you communicate more through listening as opposed to through speaking. It's a Maral. The Maral in Avos writes, my brain is not working now, your brain is working now. My brain worked when I wrote down the notes. My brain is not operating now, says the Maral. Maral says that when someone speaks, they're not thinking. A person really communicates in a healthy way when they're listening. Rosie O'Donnell said very, very well, listening is what you do when you're waiting for your turn to speak. That's Rosie O'Donnell's perspective. Listening is something you do when you wait for someone else to speak. Maral says, hafuch, it's the exact opposite. When I was in Colombia, they encouraged us to watch the therapy session of Carl Rogers. Carl Rogers speaks about unconditional positive regard. And what that means in very, very practical therapeutic terms is that Rogers would make thousands and thousands of dollars of doing the following, pardon my term, the following shtick. What Rogers would do is he would simply listen to, in a very brilliant way, simply listen to the client and say back to them what they had said, in other words, showing that he heard how and what they were feeling. That's one of the yisodos of therapy. And people, when they feel that someone is listening to them and understanding them, then they feel that they've communicated. If your wife doesn't feel that you really heard what she said, then chas v'chalila, there's so much that could be missing in the relationship. So communication has two parts to it. One is the ayin tova and a dibur that creates a positive environment, and the other is chas v'chalila, kol amatil ema b'sel pesa. That's all part of one. And number two is the koach hashmiya, being able to truly, truly listen. Number 4, sensitivity. Not only in communication to be sensitive, but to practically be sensitive to the fact that there are certain things that are important to your wife, which aren't necessarily going to be important to you. You know, I mentioned to Talmidim in the past that Bride magazine did a study, and the average bride takes 150 hours preparing for her wedding, and the average groom spends 150 hours saying, it sounds good. But in that yesod is a very, very powerful challenge. And that challenge is that if it's important to your wife, then it's something that by definition has to be important to you. And therefore, if you're remodeling the kitchen and your wife is deciding between these two colors and she's struggling and she wants your opinion, you put everything down and you give her your full attention. If you've said to your wife 3 times when she's asked you if she looks good in the dress, and you've said already 3 times that she looks good in it, so then she asks you the 4th time, you give her the full attention and you say that she looks good in it. And next time, you tell her before she asks, because clearly that's something that's important to her. I remember that Talmidim sometimes didn't understand when they used to get engaged in YU. They're talking about where to live, and the girl was saying, like, I'm not sure if I want to live in the Heights. And she says, I'm not sure if it's safe. And the guy says, what are you talking about? It's very safe. There's a guard who wears a blue shirt and has a walkie-talkie. That's really, really safe. Willie knows what I'm talking about. And but the girls, for a girl, that's really, really hard. Now, for us guys who spend 10 years in the Heights, we know that it's really safe, or we delude ourselves that it's really safe. At the end of the day, it's important to realize that a place that we feel secure doesn't necessarily mean that it's a place that our wife will feel secure, and therefore there has to be a tremendous sensitivity, even if you think that they're missing the point, that Washington Heights is one of the safest places in the world. Even if you feel that way, at the end of the day, if she feels intimidated when she sees those drug-laced oranges that they sell when you get off the FDR, so at the end of the day, then you have to have that sensitivity. The same thing applies in terms of in-laws. You know, I love to say the story that in Panovich there was once a Din Torah. The Din Torah, of course, is a follow-up of the Din Torah, the famous Torah of Shlomo HaMelech. Shlomo HaMelech was once brought a Din Torah. 2 women, each one of them said that there was a baby that was born and it was theirs. So Shlomo HaMelech said, cut the baby in half, and one of them said, absolutely, and the other one said, no, don't cut the baby in half, give it to the other one. So Shlomo HaMelech turned to the one who said, give it to the other one, and said, you're the mother. So he said, one time there was a good boy in the yeshiva was engaged, and there were 2 mother-in-laws who each one of them said that the boy had been engaged to the daughter. So the Rav Panovich said, you know what, let's cut the boy in half. So one said, absolutely, the other one said, no, no, no. He said, you can give it to the other. So he turned to one and said, absolutely. He said, you're the mother-in-law. There's a tremendous challenge in dealing with in-laws, a tremendous challenge in dealing with in-laws. And that challenge that exists is one in which we require to have a certain sensitivity. Rabbeinu said beautifully in one Shabbaton, he said at the end of the day, he said, you go into the shower, you turn it on and you scream, but you don't say anything to your wife. And that the reason for that is the following. It's all connected to the sensitivity of, wait a second, this is your wife's parents. First of all, hakaras hatov, hakaras hakavod. Your special wife is here in the world because of them and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If a person just spends a little bit of time thinking about that, then how much easier would it be to hold back from saying things that could be hurtful? That was sensitivity. So far we've had number 1, hakaras kvoda. Number 2, men are from Mars. Number 3, communication. Number 4, sensitivity, and a couple examples that we had. Now number 5, halachic issues. When I got engaged, I think it's because my wife's uncle wanted to defend my wife and make sure that he was going to protect her. He said to me, Chaim, he's a very special Oved Hashem, Talmud Chacham. He said to me, Chaim, you should know that we have a Messiah from Rav Chaim Eisenstein, and the Messiah, he was a Talmud of Rav Moshe, and he said that you should know that all chumras that a person takes cannot be at the expense of their spouse. So we have a Masorah from Rav Moshe Feinstein that even when it comes to processing halacha, it can never ever be, God forbid, at the expense of one's spouse. Now, first of all, in general, every chumrah could often be a kula. Chumras themselves are a double-edged sword, v'amevin yavin. But on a much deeper level, there's something very, very profound about this idea. And that is, we just said, we started off, there's Mechikas Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name is erased. HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name is erased for Shalom Bayis. So Kal V'chomer, if there's a Shaila in terms, and that's the Pshat Rav Moshe. Now, there, Agav, it just happens to be, I have a new addendum to this. I learned some very interesting kulas when I did Shimush and Wayu by Rav Willard Shlita, and when he was here, so he gave a shir to the Grus Kolol in Hilchos Nida. So we were discussing it, and I told him this thing that my wife's uncle had said for Rav Moshe. So he said, I also have the same Messiah from Rav Moshe. Because Rabbi Willig said that he once went to Rav Moshe Feinstein for a Shaila in Hilchos Nida. He said it was the only time that he spoke to Rav Moshe. It's well known in the YU world that Rav Willig has a few real classic / controversial kulas in Hilchos Nida. And he said he went and he asked Rav Moshe Shaila, and Rav Moshe said, follow the lenient opinion. Don't worry about the fact that there are machmirim, especially when it comes to Hilchos Nida. And then Rabbi Avram Willig said it to me in the following way. He said, every chumrah in Hilchos Nida, he said from his father, is a kula in Shalom Bayis. Now, why am I talking about Hilchos Nida? Some of you don't know anything about Hilchos Nida. You're not supposed to know anything about Hilchos Nida now. What I'm trying to bring out is, number one, that at the end of the day, kulas and chumras are something that require a tremendous sensitivity and a tremendous amount of hadracha, A. And B is, in Mirz Hashem, when you're going to get married, you're going to learn something that's absolutely beautiful. And that is the concept of Taras HaMishpacha. Taras HaMishpacha is the yesod, is the foundation of our homes. And when it comes to Taras HaMishpacha, it's important that both of you be on the same page. And therefore, number one is to realize, as Rabbi Willig said, that chumras that are expensive to your wife is something that's very, very dangerous. That's Aleph. Beis, the other lesson of that, is that it's important for you to spend time, when you get engaged, to think about who you're going to speak to, both in terms of the Shilas and Hilchos Nida, and to make sure that you get appropriate hadracha from the right sources when it comes to Hilchos Nida. My wife's college teacher was Rebbetzin Shmuelevitz. Rebbetzin Shmuelevitz said something extremely, extremely powerful, and she basically said it. My wife told me the first time she went to her for hadracha to learn the halachas of Kala, she said Rebbetzin Shmuelevitz spent 45 minutes saying the same thing for 45 minutes in different ways, and that is the most important thing to do is to ask. Never be afraid to ask a shaila. Never be afraid to ask, because a lot of times couples are machmir when they should be mekel. And every once in a while, this is not as common, couples will be mekel where they should be machmir, and when it comes to nida, it's a shaila of an isur kares. And that is something that doesn't only apply to pure halacha, but it applies to all parts of the Shulchan Aruch, not only the 4 chelkei Shulchan Aruch, but even the 5th chelik of Shulchan Aruch. The 5th chelik of Shulchan Aruch is what we refer to when we refer to a judgment call that isn't, or a lifestyle issue that doesn't apply to Shulchan Aruch per se. And that is the most important thing for Talmidim to do. If there's one thing, following in the derech of Rebbetzin Shmuelevitz, if there's one message I would want you to take away, it's not men are from Mars and women are from Venus, and that is, don't be afraid to ask for hadracha. I had a student that is divorced. Baruch Hashem, I don't have many. Baruch Hashem. But I have a student who's divorced that really treated his wife badly in his first year because he didn't realize what he was doing. He had no idea how she was feeling, and he wasn't reaching out and asking for hadracha. So that's something that's extremely important. Just like when it comes to shaylas before you're machmir, you have to ask a rav. In the 5th chelik of Shulchan Aruch as well, you have to reach out and ask your rabbeim. That's number 5 in terms of halachic issues. Number 6, this is very, very important, follows on the heels of Hilchos Nida. Inaccurate expectations. Inaccurate expectations. In the world of Hollywood, the way in which we see couples get married and then also divorced, and it happens not only this way in the movies, it happens this way in real life, is that there's a tremendous amount of excitement. Couples go into a romance, and then, well, the movies end when they go off into the sunset, and it doesn't last very long. By us, it's the exact opposite. We say in Yiddish, Punkt verkehrt. You should know that for most young Jewish couples, Orthodox couples, the most challenging time is actually the beginning. Because there are so many adjustments that take place. And it doesn't make a difference of whether the couple date for 3 weeks or whether they date for a year. It's not going to make a difference. At the end of the day, there are so many adjustments that a couple needs to make. And this applies to intimacy, and it applies to so many other parts of life. And that means that the way in which we work, which unfortunately has been influenced so much by secular society, is we come in initially with inaccurate expectations. Instead of taking the time to grow with each other, there's a certain expectation of what it's supposed to be, and God forbid, often there's tremendous amount of disappointment. The woman you're going to marry, we mentioned from the Zohar, is the other part of your neshama. And therefore, there is a responsibility for us to give ourselves time to adjust to each other. And every marriage is going to be a very important adjustment. And that means that in your mind, there's often a different prototype of a different neshama. Which neshama? Which relationship? Your parents' relationship. And sometimes in your parents' home, it went one way. But the inaccurate expectation is not only the excitement and the glitter of the initial stages of marriage, but often there's an expectation that things are going to go one way, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't want you to marry that way. That was what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted you to experience up until the age 20, up until the age 25, whatever that age of marriage might be. And then the next stage is a totally different adjustment. It's a totally different metzius. It's a totally different entity because it's a different neshama than your mother's neshama. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted you to be exposed to your mother's neshama up until age 20, up until age 25. And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted you to link with another neshama. So that's number 6, inaccurate expectations. Finally, and I alluded to this in number 5, when we discussed halachic issues, number 7 is our responsibility to address the issues and not allow the issues to become dormant. I think in terms of practical advice, that's probably the most important piece of practical advice that we could give. And Rabbos, I want to give sharp musar. It's not musar towards any particular people. It's musar about our culture in general. we go to weddings, particularly weddings in the United States, and there are, how much does, scream out, I don't know, how much does an average wedding cost in the tri-state area today? How much? $50,000. Okay. $50,000. David, I don't know if I'm going to allow my daughter to marry you. I was expecting at least $100,000. Okay. So let's go with 50. That's a good number. $50,000, okay? So I'm at the wedding, and I'm looking at all the flowers and this fantastic smorgasbord and so on and so forth. It was a little bit makel, no? He was a little makel. Maskim? Okay. We have to start the negotiation again, David. All right. So whatever the number is, but 50,000 is great. It's a good number. How many therapy sessions is $50,000? That's a lot. Rabbosai, every once in a while, I think to myself, my goodness, if these parents would have spent $40,000 on the wedding, and would have taken $10,000 and put those $10,000 away for emotional, spiritual health for the next 100 years, God willing, for their children, how much happier and how much better off would so many couples be? But the problem is that people really don't take this seriously. And what's more important is for them to look better in the eyes of their neighbors. You know how we started? We started with Pnimius HaTorah. We started with the Pnimius of Neshama. And the problem is that we work and we live, as Rabina describes, in an Alma Deshikra. And it doesn't matter if it's Israeli Haredi, American Haredi, Israeli Modern Orthodox, American Modern Orthodox. Every single tzibur is guilty of it. It's an Alma Deshikra. And asking for help isn't a weakness. Asking for help is not a weakness. Asking for help and putting money aside for emotional and spiritual health is a statement of strength. It's a statement of strength. You know, I bought my car. I hate cars. I hate drills. That's why I mentioned Shulchan Aruch will make me much more happier than a drill. Well, I have no interest in mechanics. None. And when I bought my car, there was this really cool Israeli that came in and he was looking my car up and down. He's looking it up and down. And he says, man, take good care of it. You got a good thing over there. And he starts giving me a whole list of things. I'm trying to keep track of all the things that he's telling me to do. 4 years later, the car was in the garbage heap. I didn't change the oil. You know why? Because my car is not important to me. I'm on the second one and it's also making noise in the back. I have no idea what's going on. But when it breaks, somehow I'll have to... At the end of the day, and it doesn't make sense. But the answer is I don't want to give that my necessary emotional time because I feel like there's something that's more important that I would like to do. Saying and putting away money for maintenance and saying that this is something that's really, really important for us is one of the most important things. Just like a car needs upkeep, I'm going to appeal to your business minds. Just like your car needs upkeep, lahavdil elef alfei avdalos, your marriage also needs tremendous upkeep as well. And at the end of the day, business-wise, you end up losing a lot more money if you don't give it the necessary upkeep. Rabbosai, our priorities are a little bit out of whack. Our society's priorities are out of whack. And the way in which we perceive the world is sometimes out of whack as well. I daven to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I daven to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that you internalize these 7 things. Number 1 is that there's a unique neshama that you're going to link with. And if you give it the appropriate hakaras kvoda, then there's so many challenges that might come up that you'll solve. Number 2 is that men are from Mars, women are from Venus. And chas v'chalila, if you don't internalize the special mesiras nefesh that your wife has given through recognizing that sometimes things that take place in Venus are very different than things that happen in Mars, you'll save yourself from her perceiving herself as a piece of garbage. Number 3 is communication, and that is communication in terms of creating a positive environment versus a happy one, a positive environment versus a negative one. And the other part of communication is the koach hashmi, is to be able to listen. Number 4 is sensitivity, is showing involvement and concern no matter what. Number 5 are the halachic issues, and being careful to really be able to link together Mesoras HaTorah with our Shalom Bayis. Number 6 is inaccurate expectations. And number 7 is the importance of us to realize how reaching out for help is not a weakness, but is actually a strength. And if we devote time and energy and money, and by the way, money I just used as a way of making fun of ourselves, but it's not the money that's the most important part. The most important part is the greatest gift of all that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given us, and that is our time and our energy. To devote our time and energy to create that bias that's going to be a Migdash Ma'at, and thereby have the zechus to be mamshich the Mesorah HaKadosh that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given us, to plant Kedusha in our children and future daughters.